Thank you very much, David. And you always say it so well. Thank you. It's great to be able to be here to speak to you all today. And what I wanted to share, as David said, was that I started my life, actually, although I'm in technology now for about the last 27 years, I never started my life in technology. I actually was a frog expert. And there's a lot in common between frogs and business. So what I'm going to do is take you on a little bit of a journey about what I learned in natural sciences and how I've connected and used that in business. And as we go along, I'll give you a little story about a frog, a very famous New Zealand frog, but not many people have heard of it, unfortunately. How many people know about Archie's frog? Oh, good. A few more people in Auckland then. All right, when I asked that question down in Christchurch, there were many less hands going up in the audience. So what I've done is I've used the thinking that I had in basically natural sciences, and I use the thinking almost every day in business, because business we use a lot of natural world terms. You know, we talk about the ecosystem of business, we talk about the DNA of companies, we talk about bugs in our systems, and in fact I think even the Air New Zealand terminal yesterday, one of my sort of self-check-in terminals had a wonderful little sign on it which said, I've actually just caught one of the viruses that's going around. And it was almost like, oh, it was shame, the check-in counter's got a cold. It couldn't check me in. So, you know, we use these terms all the time. And basically, businesses and economies are very much like natural systems. And in fact, they almost work with the same laws and the observations that I've had. And the key thing that I have found from my training in zoology to the work that I've got now in running businesses and growing them around the world is you're always kind of looking for what's changing out there. And then trying to then form hypotheses, and I love the way Sean said, make lists, because we biologists do often make lists. You kind of then say, well, there's a whole bunch of things changing. How do I need to now change my business to be able to adapt to the way the world is changing? Because if I don't, and I don't notice it, I'll hit the proverbial wall and go splat, and you wonder what happened, and then you become endangered like Archie's frog. So that's the discussion that we'll have today. Now, I lived and worked in this bush, actually, in the Coromandel Peninsula, and these frogs live in a beautiful remote area underneath logs, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. The guy on the right-hand side is not my husband, although I did meet my husband in the bush. This is Charles Darwin, and he actually says an amazing thing, and it is something that's resonated, and he wrote this in 1859. For those of you who tried to read the original version of The Origin of the Species, it's not very easy, it's very, very small type, but he actually said something very profound. He said that it's not the strongest, all right, that survives, and it's not actually the most intelligent that thrives, but it's the one that's the most adaptable to change. And this is, I think, is a lesson for everyone in this fast-paced world that we have, is that adaptation is important, because it's survive or thrive, it's adapt or die, evolve or be left behind. And basically, change has been going on for millennia, since the world was basically, I think Sean had it, we weren't there when it evolved, but it was this, you know, basically molten mass of rock that then slowly cooled and then life evolved. And we've had quite a lot of change. 200 million years ago, that's what New Zealand looked like. We were this little blip in the middle of Gondwana land, and the world changed. And the frog that I studied, so if that was 200 million years ago, this frog on the right-hand side, Liopelma archii, has been around for about 50 million years, and it actually hasn't changed at all. It's actually a living fossil. And it has live little froglets. It doesn't have tadpoles. It doesn't breed in water. It doesn't even go ribbit. But it's incredibly beautiful to work with. And it's actually got the equivalent of almost government intervention, because the Auckland Zoo's now figured out how to breed them on paper towels, because they're just not quite cutting it in the wild on their own anymore. And it's a story that I think that business can borrow from. If you don't change in 50 million years, and businesses actually, if you don't adapt and change, you do become endangered and extinct like Archie's frog. And I also think there's another very key thing here, that as Gondwana land broke apart, and we saw the tectonic forces shape the planet that we have today, and New Zealand's place now at the bottom of this planet, we are the last bus stop on Earth. What is key in all of that is that these tectonic forces also affect business. So think about the tectonic forces that have shaped business, and we've even heard about this in the discussions that have been presented by my co-presenters today, like the global financial crisis and the effect that had on business, the digital age of the internet and how that's disrupted entire business models, but also creates huge opportunity. And even these devices, these beautiful things you have in your hands and little eye devices and all the various smart devices, these things are coming along, and ignore them at your peril, because they are creating opportunity, but they're also going to disrupt your business models as well. So what we see is these creative destruction. So while we create new things, we're destroying old things. And this has been happening for millennia. And this is why natural sciences and business have so much in common. And what I'm seeing here, if the clicker works, is that we have an opportunity for businesses to basically adapt or die, survive or thrive, and many of them are crossing the chasm. And what I'm seeing are all businesses are reaching their inflection point. And what I'm noticing as I travel the world and I talk to businesses, large and small, in Asia Pacific, in Australia and New Zealand, and in Europe, whether you are very, very big or very, very small, they are all basically saying they can't keep doing in the next 4 years what they were doing in the last 4 years. Because the pace of change of what is happening around them is causing them to have so much change coming at them that they're having to actually transform their business and their business models. And I'm going to give you the 5 things that I see in all of my conversations that are actually fundamentally affecting this. Go the right way on the slides would help, wouldn't it? So the first thing that we actually start to see is the consumerization of devices. And what we're seeing in this world are these devices where the power has shifted to the hands of the consumer or the customer. The customer or the consumer now has more information in their hands than your people inside your company or the people inside the store or people inside the business. They know what they want. It's almost been like a consumer revolution. So the balance of power has shifted. And it's a very, very significant shift. And in businesses that haven't figured out now how to tap into how you use and make use of that will actually start to suffer a disruption of their businesses and their business models. So the bias of the information now is in the hands of the consumer. The second thing that is actually a big shift in the world today are these wonderful people. And we have many of you in this audience. I can see the millennials out there. Millennials are different, and you know you're different. And there's a lot written on millennials. They're social, digital natives. They sleep with their devices. They're online all the time, and they're wired for this world. In fact, they're born for this world. And I can see a few of you smiling out there and nodding about that. Because you don't want to wait 27 years to become the president of your company. In fact, many of you will actually probably start your own companies, and you see many great examples of young people coming and actually starting their own businesses and creating the next set of paradigms that are coming out there. And they're creative and they're collaborative and they work in open environments, and don't put them in a small cube and ask them to read Excel spreadsheets or ask them to go and make the coffee. Because they'll probably say, go and make it yourself. And in fact, there's some great blogs of that. What they are able to do is they're able to actually give you a profound new insight into the way in which business can be done. And there's a lot that we can learn as businesses from millennials. And in fact, they make about an impact on about 50% of buying decisions. And in fact, they often actually even dictate what's going to be eaten that night for dinner. Because they actually also have an opinion on that when affecting, what's being bought in the house. So they're a very important segment from a market perspective to understand, but also in terms of actually how you incorporate and use them to renew your company and renew your business. And I've done a lot of work in terms of diversity, not just gender diversity and ethnic diversity, but generational diversity in companies. There's a lot to be said in this area. There's a third key thing that's actually affecting businesses today, and this is the economy. And we all know that the economy is not going to get better anytime soon. We are in a new normal. This is just what it's going to be like. It's not just going to suddenly miraculously get better. And the old commoditized way of relating to customers with mass production and made in China, and your eyes glaze over as you go through the shopping malls of this world where everything looks the same, it's not cutting it anymore. And people are now finding that people are prepared to, even in these tough times, pay premiums for experiences that go beyond the commodity, because that is actually and what is going to entice them to spend again. And the companies that actually have figured out customer experience, and I actually think Air New Zealand, I'm not sure if Rob's still in the audience, but Air New Zealand has figured out customer experience. You look at the likes of Nike, the likes of Apple. These are companies that, in spite of the tough economic times, are still actually punching above their weight and doing very well because they've figured out how to actually delight their customers and to get them to spend in these challenging times. And Joe Pine has written a really brilliant book on this whole topic, and he has called it the experience economy. But what we are doing is we're moving into a post-industrial revolution world now, where, as I said, this mass production, made in China, undifferentiated stuff, where you're just competing on price and cheap, how can we get it out there the cheapest, is no longer good enough. And it's been proven now that people are prepared to pay a premium for a great experience. This huge value now in knowing who I am, what I like, where I am, through location services. The millennials, they're wonderfully narcissistic. They love to take photographs of themselves. They take photographs of their friends. They take photographs of their food. And they put these things up online. And everyone's trying to stalk them to understand what they really want. And what's interesting is that we are actually, and in fact this is what I'm doing, is that we're actually now connecting and creating the technology that actually brings this together, where it isn't just social media where you're stalking these wonderful people, you're actually turning it into social commerce and making this a reality. And I don't have time to talk to you about all the wonderful things that we're doing with this technology, but I can tell you, we can start to cater now to segments of one rather than these undifferentiated mass segments. And as I said, the companies that are doing this today, and we already have so many wonderful examples, are already thriving, and we're helping companies reimagine what their customer experiences can be. And once you've reimagined your customer experience, you can invent whole new business models and monetization models using these devices. And you will actually then renew your business, and you will probably be thriving for the next many years to come. If you haven't figured that out, you will actually probably be ignoring some of these trends at your peril. And you probably need to start thinking about that now in terms of how you actually start to adapt your business models. Stephen Denning writes a very interesting book called Radical Management. I don't call it radical, but he talks about putting the customer at the center of your value chain and creating those experiences. And this is the next generation. We're moving from a shareholder-type capitalism to a customer capitalism, where shareholders benefit because you're looking after the customer better and you're delivering them great experiences. And the last but not least, businesses are being affected by legislation. So whether you're in Europe, America, or in Asia Pacific, or in New Zealand, and there's a lot being written about the TPP and what that might actually do or not do to your business, there's a lot of things that happen to you that you don't have control over, but you need to navigate, which is also affecting the way business works. And here is maybe just to pause for one moment. But when you reflect on the trends and you reflect at why businesses are struggling to adapt to some of these new trends I've just talked about, part of the problem is this. We are still stuck in an old industrial revolution model, a one-way serial supply chain, where R&D is at one end and then you basically shove everything down a pipe at lowest possible cost for an average experience to get something for a customer. The problem is that model doesn't really work. It doesn't work for the millennials. It certainly doesn't work through these devices. And when you're trying to create personalized experiences, how the hell do you do that in that model? I'm actually working with businesses reshaping these value chains now and actually helping put the customer at the center. And what we're doing is we're remapping and reimagining customer experiences and putting the consumer at the very center of everything that you do to reimagine the jobs to be done, to look at your supply chain and your value chain through the customer's eyes, to create the customer and next generation experiences. And then you layer that with some of these new technologies, and suddenly you're creating new monetization models. And in fact, we're using millennials and young students, and in fact, I had a whole bunch of them walk up to me in Wellington saying, we'd like to help you design this, because we're designing the new experiences using these technologies. And there are so many amazing apps that are developed, and what we're doing is we're putting them all onto a giant marketplace to start to be able to create this new way and this new democratization of actually how we can put customers in charge of processes and have them working with companies to create these truly customer-centric experiences. And so basically the paradigm of the shift means that you're moving into demand chains working with supply chains, and you're moving from social media and stalking people into real-time social commerce. And in that model, everybody can win. There's something in it for customers and there's something in it for business. So basically, the reason why I'm back here in New Zealand, I'm a Kiwi. I was basically born and raised in Wellington. I lived part of my life in Auckland, and I now have 2 wonderful homes down in the South Island of New Zealand. And I'm back here because I think that we have tremendous opportunity as a country. I actually feel the pulse of New Zealand is actually at the cusp of something quite new. And you can see this actually when you just listen to the award winners. This is actually our time, particularly in the digital time, because we transcend the one tyranny we've always had, which was distance. We were always just felt so far away from things. Now we can actually plug into a community that is here and now. There are people streaming into this audience real-time live from overseas. And in fact, I know for a fact my daughter's tuning into this from Edinburgh in Scotland and has been watching these presentations of these wonderful people and what they're saying. Because we're in an all-the-time connected world where we can all be connected together. And what's interesting about the world that we have is that we have an incredibly educated population of people in New Zealand, and this thing called disobedient thinking. Annabelle calls it naughty thinking, all right, which I think is also good. But basically, when I was overseas and running big companies, and I was working in North America, and I would say, you know, as president, you can get to ask people to do things, and you sort of, then they would look at you and go, yeah, yes, sir, how high, when you ask them to jump, or yes, ma'am, as they used to say to me. I could never actually get used to that. I looked around and thought, who's ma'am? Oh, it's me they're talking to. But I don't want people to just say, yes, ma'am, how high? What I love about New Zealand is that they go, yeah, but why? I love the why. Challenge me, to ask me why, because presidents don't have all the answers. Leaders don't have all the answers. And in fact, some of the best answers and the inspiration actually lie within the people that work inside the companies. This is something that creates the Maori haka in the All Blacks. This is something that actually creates the wearable art, the Weta workshop, and all of the amazing creativity, because the disobedient thinking, and even, you know, why make a list and make microbes make something out of ethanol? Isn't that extraordinary? And, you know, we come together and do that in New Zealand because we question why. We challenge paradigms. So this creativity is actually something that I'm tapping into in New Zealand, as you can feel it, because you feel it even when you walk into the Air New Zealand airline lounge in San Francisco. It just feels different. And it's actually so nice to feel and tap into that creative energy. And so we are truly in this digital world limited only by our imagination. We truly can create lists. We can truly reimagine the future. We can certainly reimagine how we want to actually give customer experiences, and we can design new models that actually enhance the benefit, not only of customers and of people, but even I was having a conversation last night with somebody who's working with the United Nations around fair trade, because this model actually empowers, because we can bring it all the way down to makers who are sitting in Bangladesh or in Cambodia, not to make for sweatshops who are going to send it to Primark, but why aren't they making it themselves and taking the money themselves and actually already going on the online digital stage themselves? So we're doing some work, in fact, Annabelle and I have been talking about actually teaming up on this around fair trade. There's a huge amount of empowerment to be done for the people who are already participating in the system but are being exploited in that system as well. And we are the most free society. 123 countries were surveyed in the world, and New Zealand was ranked number 1. You know, we talk about, we need a more hands-on government. And no, you don't. Trust me, I've lived in economies around the world where you have a very hands-on government. And what happens is that you lose your power and they run out of spending your money eventually. Because it actually just means higher taxes. And there's plenty of examples of that in Europe. What you need is you would need a very empowered people who are creating all the time, and the government creating a good governance to create the environment for you to thrive, but they shouldn't be telling you what to do or telling you what kind of olive oil you can eat, as I've seen in Europe repeatedly, and even in America, which is the land of the free, is very highly regulated, where you kind of, you have to become very obedient, and we're not good at being obedient, we're quite disobedient. And lastly, we have no subprime crisis. We are so lucky in that way, because we can actually start to be, I think somebody said yesterday, we are the lucky country. And I think our time is coming where where instead of us worrying about, 0.5% GDP in the UK and how do we actually, through austerity, save our way out of that, or the US where we're still, we've got so many issues there. We are truly now talking about the real issues of how we actually grow our economy. We have a business growth agenda through the government where we can actually start to reimagine our future. And we can do that because we've got 2.5% GDP, and I think the sky is just the limit for New Zealand. So I think Charles Darwin is right. We are adaptable. We've got a huge amount of creativity, and I can just see us thriving. And it's been a pleasure to be able to share those few thoughts with you today. Thank you very much.